Hi everybody. Oh, I'm really excited to be back doing these classes for you or with you, which is super exciting. I know it's been a while and I apologise, but unfortunately it couldn't be helped. You will laugh though, because when I went to have my angiogram, you have to go in and they put dye through your arteries and all the rest of it. But then when you come out, you have to wait like 3 hours while they reduce the pressure band that you've got around your wrist. So I'm sat there in a ward on a hospital bed designing patterns in Canvas Workspace, and all the nurses kept coming up and going, "What are you doing now?" I'm like, "This. Oh, that's lovely. How do you do that?" So it was really quite funny. Even in hospital, I'm there doing crafting, which just made me smile. Right, so this year I want to take you more into Canvas Workspace, because well, where we're heading in 2024 from Highlight Crafts is concerned with ScanNCut is we're going to take you on a journey of the projects that you make are made, everything's made from the ScanNCut. The card blank, the mats, the layers, the stencil, the cutting design that you would change for, you know, if you had a die that cuts in, we're going to do that kind of thing. Lots of made from the memory, hopefully, and really get you to get the most out of what's pre-installed in your machine's memory, because when I've looked at other machines that are out there, you get such a small amount of artwork that's inside, that the files that are inside, I think you get something like certainly less than 20, whereas on most ScanNCuts the minimum you've got is 600. So we need to be getting more out of those as well as your USBs, and I'm really on a mission to get you to that next level. So I thought we'd have a play around today. I have no idea what we're going to do, but I know that once I start playing, all these things will come in. So we'll have a look at it and see where we get to. Right, so when you go to Canvas Workspace, this is what will open up. This is called Canvas Projects, okay? And these are designs that, or projects that people who work for Brother or Brother Pay externally have designed for you. And it's always worth going through these because you get the cutting files for them all. So there's thousands of free cutting files just embedded in these. You also get a little video tutorial, and you get written step-by-steps. They're pretty basic, you know, the instructions are pretty basic, but, you know, the other day I wanted a butterfly, and rather than designing a butterfly, which is quite difficult to do out of the shapes, I just used one that was in Canvas, one of the projects. So we can mix and match between it, which is really cool. But what we're going to do is design something that you may cut into the front of a card. You might want to use it as a stencil. You might want to use part of it on a card and just kind of split it, that kind of thing. And it's really interesting because I've just done Made from the Memory Volume 2. I've learnt so much. Half of it by making mistakes, but half of it by going, I wonder what would happen if I did that. And that's what Canvas is all about. And the best thing is there's always an undo button. Even for weld, or even if you delete everything, you can always undo it, which is brilliant. So that, for me as a crafter who's not quite sure, when you just start finding out new things, takes the fear away. Because if I do something wrong, I can undo it. So that's great. Right, so let's go into Canvas itself. So I'm going in here, I'm going to a new project, all right, because we're going to create a new project. So down the side of here, you'll recognize some of these. So you've got your basic shapes. They're exactly the same as they are in your machine. There's no extras. It is what it is. You've got your borders, they're the same. You've got your logos, which are kind of your welded words. You do have extra fonts in here that are really quite nice. So if you're working on an older machine like a CM 600 or 300, you've got extra fonts in here, which is super cool. So have a good look through those. And then these are all the added extras that I've added on over the years, like the bolt-on kits, if you like. But we're going to start with basic shapes, and I'm going to bring in 3 shapes to start with. Okay, so first one I'll bring in will be a circle. The next one I think I'll bring in will be a square. And I think we might have let's do a heart, I think. Let's see what we come up with this. And I never really know what I'm going to get until I start playing around. And actually, that's quite fun. The one thing I do know though, and this is something I've found over the time that I've been doing it, is you need to kind of shrink the shapes down to the size you want them to be when you're building the pattern, because What we're going to do to enable us to weld all these different shapes together is we're going to create frames, and then within that frame you will have an offset line. So if I now created let's say a 3mm inward offset line in this circle to give me a frame, when I shrink that down, that 3mm distance is going to be reduced, and sometimes it gets too thin, and other times it doesn't give you enough space to be able to create another layer to go on top. All right, so I'm going to concentrate on that bit for today. And I know it's easier to see when they're bigger, but when I scale it down, I lose that distance of the frame, which you need. You need that distance to be able to get it off the mat, basically. So let's do it at 30mm. Okay, so let's set each shape to 30mm. Now, you can do that just by doing this. You could just bring it into your machine first and then set it. But what I tend to do is go into properties up here. And in here, maintain the aspect ratio. So that keeps it, it doesn't warp it, stops it warping. And I'm just going to go in here and I'm just going to backspace and type in 30.0. And then when I click on the X, it will then make that 30mm. And you can see that because it shows you at the bottom of the screen here. So let's do the same with the heart. And let's make that. We might change the sizes as we go along, but at least we've got a starting point. So let's do this one as well, like so. And then let's do the square as well. So properties is quite an interesting one to look at as well. It's the other great thing about Canvas Workspace is you can go to, if I wanted 30.2504 or 30.25, I can do that. Whereas normally it's full millimeter increments. You can get much more specific with this. So that's another reason to have a play around. So let's do that one at 30. And let's close that. Right, so I've now got my 3 shapes here. So the next thing we're going to do is create inward offset lines, and I'm going to do a 4mm, because if you imagine you've got your pattern and then you want another layer that goes on top of that and sits within the apertures that you've created in the first layer, it'll make more sense when we do it. You need space to be able to fit that other layer in. Okay, so we're going to work with that in mind. So I'm going to go up to Edit, and I'm going to go to this button here, which is Create Offset Line. Now, you have one of these on an SDX machine. However, you don't have it on a CM machine. So I'm going to show you on Canvas so that everybody can do the same thing. So we're going to create an offset line, and we're going to make it 4mm. This is always a little bit of a divil to get it right. We're going to make it inward. And we're going to leave the original as it is because we need it for the frame, okay? So then all we do is say, right, we're ready, we press OK. There is my circle. Do exactly the same with the square. So Edit, and in Edit here, this is your edit box here. Go to Create Offset Line, 4mm inward, and press OK. And then exactly the same thing with the heart. So Properties, nope, sorry, wrong one. Edit, Offset, 4mm, inward, and OK. So I've now got my offsets for all my shapes. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to drag a box around all of those to select them all. We're going to go to Edit, and we're going to see if we can divide them all at once. We might be able to, we might not, but unless you ask the question, you don't know. And it looks like you can. So that's perfect. So instead of doing them individually, you now know that you can create them separately. Now, before we divided, it saw each one of these shapes as the large shape with the smaller one sat on top of it. By dividing it, it now means that it sees it as a frame. So I'm just going to go back before I divided it and show you something, because this is why we divide. If I take that and group those together now, so I go to Edit and Group, and then I group those together and go to Edit and Group, and I want to weld that to the circle. When I do that and weld, the shapes on the inside disappear. because it can only weld the shapes that are overlapped. So it can only do the outside circle and the inside square. Let's see what happens if we overlap it more. So if I grab that and move that further over, let's see if it works then. So let's grab both of those, go to Edit and Weld and see what we get then. Still removes it. Right, so this is why you will find that I use divide a lot, because it means that we can then weld things to a frame or shapes to shapes. So just to show you divide again, you're going to grab all of that, you're going to go to Edit, and down at the bottom is Process Overlap. And all you're going to do is click the second one in, and that will divide those shapes. So in my head, divide sends a big punch down, and it punches the smaller shape through the larger shape. And then those are your bits that are left behind. So you've then got your 3 shapes that you can now weld and overlay, because that's one shape, that's one shape, and that's one shape. That's how it sees it now. And it's understanding all those little things that makes a massive difference when you're working with your ScanNCut. Because once you understand what it needs to see what you want it to do, what you want it to do, when you understand how to make it do that, it's an absolute breeze to do. Right, so let's have a play around with these for a minute now. So I might want to have my circle overlapped like that. Now at any point here we can make these bigger or smaller. So let's make the square a little bit bigger, all right? And I'm just literally going to drag it like this. I'm then going to take the circle and I'm going to position that there. And then I'm going to bring the heart and I'm going to make the heart a little bit smaller. And all you do is play around with this. So get yourself get a laptop or a tablet or your phone. It's easier on a laptop, I'm not going to lie. And it's easier with the web app version because it tells you what everything is when you hover over it. So if you're brand new to it, do it on a laptop and just sit on the sofa at night and just play. And you'll be amazed how many things you come up with. So I've selected all 3 shapes now, and I'm just going to use the alignment function. And we're used to this because it's on our machine. So I'm going to align them centrally vertically, go back up to Edit, and align them centrally horizontally. And now I'm going to weld them just to see what I get. Because remember, I can always undo it. So I'm going to weld. I'll spend hours doing stuff like this. I love it. So now we've got this kind of pattern. Okay, and I think I need a bit more detail than that. So I'm going to undo that. And I'm going to change these little bits around a little bit. So we're going to have the square. And what I'm going to do is rotate that square 45 degrees so it's a diamond, because I think it'll look nicer. So we go back into Properties. And here is your rotation. So I'm going to backspace that. And I'm going to type in 45. And close it down, and that gives me that now. So that gives me a different look and feel. I'm then going to bring in the circle. That means that the circle will weld in a different place. So I quite like the look of that, what that's going to give me. And then if it does that, it's because you've clicked your mouse again. So if you click a shape once, it selects it. If you double click it or you click it again, it gives you the points, the nodes, and we're not even going to go into that yet because that's more complicated. We're just going to stick with what we know so far. So we're going to do this, and then I'm just going to position the heart in the middle, and I'm going to make that heart a little bit smaller. Now I am risking the fact that I'm making that offset line slightly narrower, but because I started quite small, I'm not going down by too much. So I'm not worried about that. If I'd started with this at like 4 or 5 inches and then I went down to this size, it wouldn't work the same. But because I started with the shapes quite small anyway, I'm all right with that. So now I just sit and play again. So I select them all, go to Edit and Align, and we align them to the center vertically. And then they call the horizontal line the middle. I like to say centrally horizontally and centrally vertically because it makes more sense in my head. Then I go to Edit and we're going to weld. That's nicer. So we've now got this nice little pattern that we can start to build. Now what I'm going to do now is make that a little bit smaller. And if you ever think, oh, well, what happens if, if it's too small, it will eliminate any pieces that are too small when you download it. So you don't need to worry about that. Right, so how do we now make that into a pattern, you know, like a stencil pattern? So this is where it becomes really easy now. Now you can either do this, send it to your machine and do it on your machine, or you can continue to work in Canvas. It really doesn't matter. So I'm going to edit this. I'm going to edit it and duplicate it. And I'm going to move this to the side here like this. Now the zoom function on Canvas is brilliant because you can zoom right in and you can really get in and see the nitty-gritty. And also when you click off it, it gives you a clean view of the two shapes. If you do it on your machine, one of the things is always selected, so you can't always see clearly what you're looking for. So that for me is perfect. So let's now select one, and just using the arrows on your keyboard, or if you're doing it on your machine, your little nudge buttons, we're just going to nudge it so that it overlaps. And I just want it to overlap a bit more than that, I think. So I'm just going to use my arrows. That's a bit better. So let's weld those now. Okay, now I managed to get it right aligned at the bottom. Always check. So when you select both, go in and just align to the bottom because you don't want part of the pattern looking a little bit odd. And then we're going to weld these two together. Okay, so we're going to weld. Now, because I started with divided shapes, I don't need to divide it again, which is really cool. So I can just keep going. So now we're going to duplicate that. So we're going to select all. We're going to go to edit and we're going to duplicate that. And we're going to move that one over here. And again, I'm going to have it so it's literally just touching. So I can click off. I can see that that's not quite right. So I can nudge that over, click off again. And then I'm going to align them because I can see that one is slightly lower than the other. So we're going to go to edit and we're going to align to the bottom or the top, doesn't matter. Then I'm going to select this one. I'm going to nudge it over the same amount of nudges as I did for the first one. Okay, that's important that you remember that number. And now I'm going to weld that together. So edit and weld. And then I'm going to do it one more time. Okay, so we're going to duplicate it again. So select all, go to edit and duplicate it again. And then I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to move this over here and I'm going to position it so it's just touching. Move that over a little bit more. I might do one more actually, just to make sure. There we go, perfect. Now I'm going to drag a box around all of that. Go to edit, align it to the bottom, and then edit, and I need to nudge it across. So on here, click on whichever one, it doesn't matter which one you click on, to be honest. And then you're going to select that, go to edit, and weld that together. So I've now got a border. Now what I want to do now is bring that border down. So now we have options. So let's see what we get. I've never made this design before, so we'll just see what we get together. And I like this because then you get to see how my brains are working, which might be quite scary for you, but you know what? It's a good thing because you'll learn loads of stuff because my brain works differently to a lot of people's. Right, so what happens if I do this? What happens if I slot that into there? I'm just going to use my arrows, that's better. What if I weld that now? I wonder what that would look like. Let's try it. Remember, we've got an undo. So let's go to edit and let's weld that, see what we get with that. Quite like that, but can you see there? I haven't moved that shape the same distance as I did before, and it's given me that line. Now I can get rid of that when I do a bit when we finish it. So I'm not going to worry about that now. I'm going to leave that as it is and we can address that later on because you're not really going to notice it when you cut it out. You will if it's there as a cut line, but if we delete it, it's not going to look like there's anything missing. Right, so let's duplicate this. So we've got two of these and let's now line this up. Now the way to do this is to go back in and drop it in like we did before. So we are just looking at creating that thick black line. Let's see where we need to go. I'm going to go up a couple and I'm going to go over one. That looks better to me. Right, let's see what happens with that. So let's go to edit and weld. Yeah, And now we've got another line here and then a few more lines here, but again, we'll address those later. They're going to come in at some point. That's why you need a notebook and a pen at the side of you so you can write down how many nudges you go so that you know that every time you do it, it's even. And if you prefer to do that on your machine, that's fine. I normally do it on my machine because I can be more accurate. And I know that every space on an SDX, every nudge is 0.5 millimetre. Every nudge on a CM is 1 millimetre. So I can get really precise if I do it on my machine. But I just wanted to show you this. So let's do the same thing again. Let's duplicate this. And remember, once you've done this once, you don't need to do it again. Okay. So you've done it once, you save it, that's it. Right, let's just nudge that up one and let's go over to the left a bit. No, other way, Melanie. That's it. Right, let's just do that. And then I can show you the next bit. Right, so let's group that, or weld that rather. I was thinking about it because it has a lot of things to do now. Right, perfect. So we've now got our pattern. Now, if I select that and go to edit, there's no option for me to group or ungroup it because it's just one piece. But I want to ungroup it because I want to get rid of these lines and I might want to add something else in. I don't know, we haven't decided yet. The only way to do that is to send it to your machine. Now, whether that's via Wi-Fi or whether it's via a USB, it really doesn't matter. So we're going to click off that so that that disappears and we're just going to go and download it. So we're downloading it and then it gives you options. If you're working on a machine that is not Wi-Fi enabled, you will send it to your PC. And if it's if it's Windows 10 or above, it will save it to your downloads folder. It won't give you an option to choose. If you're working on a previous operating system, it gives you the option to choose. So you'll know whichever way it is. So you can download it to your PC, or if you've got a Wi-Fi enabled machine, you can ScanNCut transfer it. I still want to prove this year that there is nothing that you can't do with a CM machine and Canvas that you can do with an SDX. Yes, it's got more designs in it, so that's a different thing. But functionality-wise, there's nothing that you can do with an SDX that you can't with a CM and Canvas Workspace, which is another reason why I wanted to teach you more Canvas, because I want everybody to be able to stay on that same level of journey, okay? Right, so we've downloaded it. So to retrieve it, we go to Retrieve Data, and we retrieve it from the cloud. And it's going to send it now down to my machine, which I think is really clever. What I would really like, brother, to do, and I don't even know if it's a possibility, is to have like a queue. So if you design 10 things, you could send them all and they just go into a queue, because right now it will only remember the last one that you've sent. So there's other little things that I'd like them to do, but I'm just breaking them in gently at the moment. Right, so I've got that now. And what I'm going to do is just save that straight back to the cloud. So I'm not touching it. I'm not doing anything with it. I'm just saving it straight back to the cloud. And then look what happens here. So if I get rid of this now, I can put this in the bin. I know that might be a bit scary because you haven't seen that I've saved it, but I know that it's there. And if it's not, I can undo it until that pattern comes back. And it will always be stored in my projects, not my personal projects. It will be your projects, but that's what it says on the screen. So now I've got this. Okay, so I've now got my pattern that I've saved. Now, if I go into Edit now, it now gives me the option to ungroup it, which is brilliant because it now means that I can go in, hopefully. Now, this bit is important just before I carry on with the rest. Now it's ungrouped, it sees all that pattern inside the outside edge underneath the outside shape. Okay, so all those hearts and those little bits and pieces are all hidden as far as Canvas and the SD and the ScanNCut see. It's hidden underneath that zigzag rectangle. Okay, so we need to change the way that it sees it. So we select the outside edge, we go to Edit, and in order, we send it to the back. Now, if you're used to using Minecraft Studio, you'll recognize order. Nothing changes on your screen at all, okay? It doesn't like jump or look like it's gone behind. It just sends it to the back. But now I can go in and I can delete these extra lines. So anything where you haven't quite managed to do it properly, you can do now. The other thing that you can do is move that outside edge out of the way completely, like that, and then go in and do this. Now, there is a shortcut that Lauren taught me once, and I can't remember what it is. And it's something that you press, and then you can select multiple parts. Command, Andrew's saying. Just control on its own. Nope, that's not that one. So it was something, I can't remember what she said it was called. But I'll find out, and I'll get Andrew to add it on as a little written thing. Yeah. Just go and ask Lauren, Andrew. Sorry, I'm talking to my director, producer, everything else in my ear called Andrew. So if you're living in a different country, you'll have no idea who I'm talking to. I'm talking to Andrew. And Lauren is one of our graphic designers. So when she showed me this, I was like, this is amazing. It's what, darling? Oh, okay. We'll come back to that in a bit because it's really clever because you can literally just click. And I'm sure there are thousands of you screaming at me now going, it's this, Mel. I know, but I'm not very good at remembering shortcuts. I'm the same when I drive. I'll always go the long way around. Round the houses, as my mum used to say. You always go round the houses. I'm like, yeah, I know. But what I tend to do is learn it the long way around, and then I start to get a bit more confident. Right, so now we've got our pattern. There's just another few here, so we can delete that. And you don't need to go up to the bin every time. So I know I remember doing a show and Martin Parker was the presenter, and he's like, you do know you can just press delete on your keyboard, don't you? And I was like, no. And actually it doesn't work on this one, so no. Some you can, some you can't, eh? Technology is a wonderful thing when it works. Right, so now I've got all of these individual pieces. Now, the other thing that we need to be mindful of is the pattern count. So the pattern count, the maximum, I believe, let me just check before I tell you. I'm just going to check on my ScanNCut, and you'll be able to do this on yours because when you go into here and go down to the bottom and up, it gives you the machine information. So the maximum pattern number on an SDX is 900. I think on an SDX 900, it's 600. I think on a 1200, it's on the Disney one, it's 900. I think on a CM 300 and 600, it's 300 paths. I can't quite remember if that's absolutely accurate, but it will tell you somewhere in your machine, so you can check. But what I'm going to do right now is just go to Project up here. And when you click on Project, you've got different options, but 1, 2, 3 counts the amount of shapes that you've got, because if it gets to too many, it will refuse to download it. And in that case, what you do is you make a smaller pattern, as in less rows, and you send it to your machine, and then you can start to increase it. Because it's not that it can only cut that many, it can only read that many. And the reason I know that is because if you're cutting little hearts for shaker cards and you do the maximum on here of 900, but you've still got loads of space on your mat and actually you want 2,700, if you group that 900 on your machine, it then sees it as 1. So I know that it can cut more than that, but it only reads that many. That's the capacity it has to read different shapes. So it's an interesting one, that. So when I click on 1, 2, 3, it's telling me that that's 513 little shapes. You wouldn't think that, would you, looking at that? But there's a lot there. So I'm all right with that. So let's grab all of those and let's group that together. So go to Edit and Group. And you can see as I hover over that, it tells you what it does. That's why I find this is the easiest way to use Canvas. Just for now, we might get a little bit more experience later on, but as a beginner, this is by far the easiest way to do it. Then we'll go to Edit. So I've selected the outline and the detail now, and I'm going to align that centrally vertically, go to Edit and align it centrally horizontally. I can then move that up and then I can group that together. So before I do that, I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about this. So This outside edge is just like it is like a foundation die. When you get all your detail die and then you get the outside edge, that's what this is. And all this detail now you can put into all sorts of different shapes. And the way that we do that, so if you wanted a stencil, I'd get rid of the outside edge completely. I'd send this down to my machine and I'd ask it to cut it. If I just wanted a section of it, when you ungroup it, so let's say, for example, I just wanted 3 rows. I'm going to do it because I can always go back and undo what I've done. So if I go to edit and ungroup this, and if you ever find that halfway through a project you look at it and it's either stopped giving you the sizes in properties or it's refusing to ungroup, send it back to your machine, send it back again, dig your heels in, because it does it now and again. It goes, oh no, I've done that too many times. I'm not doing it again. That's a bit of a strop. So you send it back to your machine, send it back to Canvas. And it's only by playing with it that I've learned all this. So really don't give yourself a hard time. Take the pressure off and just press a button because you're not wasting anything. And even if you spend 3 or 4 hours and don't complete anything, you'll have learned something. So that's the best thing. Right, so let's say I just want these 3 rows. So I'm going to drag right the way over here and I'm going to delete that. And then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to use these to just pick up these little extra pieces. Okay, so we're going to delete that. And I'm going to get rid of that little piece as well. So this is where you start to edit, if you like. So you've made your big design, you know that that's perfect for your stencil. But now you want to edit because you want to do this for something a little bit different. You want this to cut into a panel in your front of your card. Okay, so let's say that we want to do that. We've got a card, we want a lovely panel to cut in on the front so that we can then use maybe one of our decoupage florals from the USBs that we sell you, maybe the flower of the month that I had on a TV yesterday. That might be a good one. You know, you might want to put a photograph. You might want to use this on a scrapbook page and just cut a pattern into the side of your page. So the thing that I like to do now is look at this and go, right, so I've got an extra pattern there. I've got this extra piece here. Do I duplicate that and put another one at the top, or do I get rid of this, or do I do both? You know, this is the thing. Out of one design, you'll get so many more things, which is really exciting because that's what we want. If we're going to spend an hour designing something, we want it to do lots of different things. But how fabulous is this? That you can just go in and you can just select your bits like this, and you can go in. Now that, if we grouped that, would then cut into a card. So it might be, let's bring on a square so I can show you what a card front might look like. Let's go into the square. If you want to change the increment measurement, you go into view and down at the bottom, you can change it to inches. And it's really funny because when it's inches, when it's a card shape, like an 8x8, I'll do it in inches. When it's something like this, I'll do it in millimeters. I'm a proper oddball, honestly. Now you can see down here that it's still in millimeters. Once you click off it and click on it again, it now comes up in inches. So I'm going to go into properties and I'm going to make that 8. Well, actually, let's do 7.5 because then it gives you ½ an inch for your mats and layers. Right, so let's click that. That makes that size. So we can either make that a little bit smaller. We can go in and make the pattern a little bit bigger if we want to. We could, let's make that a little bit bigger like that. So this would be your 8x8 card. That would be your pattern panel down the middle. You could then go in and add, let's bring in another square. So you could have a rectangle here like so and drag this down. Oh, this is when you get that going edit sending to the back thing when you start to move stuff around, but that's okay because you're not cutting into anything at this point. So you could have this here. This could have your sentiment on it if you wanted to. So you could have a sentiment coming down here. You could have a beautiful floral decoupaged up here, and then you've got your pattern that cuts into your card. And I love that. I think that's really, really cool. And it's just a circle, a square and a heart, and you've started to create all these amazing things, which is brilliant. Right, I'm going to use undo now just to show you how easy it is. So undo will undo every step that you've done, and it will just keep going. You do have an undo button on your machine. However, only goes back 10 places. And sometimes you want more than that, like now. I just want to keep going till I've got the whole thing back in place. So it's going to put all these pieces back in place. It's quite fun actually watching how it does it. And just keep clicking, okay? If it comes to a state now, I'm back to my full piece. Is it grouped? Yes, it is. So now I'm back to where I started, which is cool. So the next bit I'm going to show you is how we put this pattern into a different shape, because that's really cool. So first thing I'm going to do is select both, go to edit and align it centrally vertically, edit and align it centrally horizontally. And then I'm going to divide it. Now remember, we divided it. It was that big digital punch that came down. This time it's going to come down. It's going to punch all that detail through that zigzag edge. So we go to edit and divide. And it's not difficult. There's none of this is rocket science. If I can do it, you guys can do it. There are people out there that are far better on Canvas than I am, but I learn the way that I teach. So I learn the next bit I need to do to be able to do the next bit that I want to achieve. That's how I do it. And while that blue band is going across the top, it's working on it. Now, sometimes, and it's very occasionally that it happens, it comes up with this message, unexpected server error. And that's because it's taking too long. At that point, you can do the dividing bit in the PC version. Okay, so because there's so many shapes and it's not as powerful as a graphics program as the downloadable PC version, sometimes it times out. So what I would do in that case is I would get rid of this outside edge to start with. So let's put that in the bin. It's too much for it to cope with at the moment. So we're going to undo this, ungroup it like this, and we're going to get rid of some of the pattern. So let's just drag across this. And this is why I like doing this without planning it in advance, because it means that you will see all of it. You know, you'll see the good bits and you'll see the not so good bits. And that's what I need you to see. I need you to see that if something goes wrong, it doesn't matter. If it can't do something, why can it not do it? That's the bit that I want to teach you this year, because it's no good knowing that it won't do it if you don't know why. Because if you know why, you can then find a solution to it. And that's how I kind of work when I'm doing this. Right, let's just do this. Let's try, Andrew's saying try shift to see if it'll allow me to drag across more. I'm just going to get rid of all this lot first, because that's easy enough to do. And I'm looking at what I've got on this side. So I need to get rid of that bit and put that in the bin. And that one, nearly there now anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And then that one. So you do spend a little bit of time going backwards and forwards, but you know what? That's it. It's all a learning curve. I like that. I like learning like that. Right, so I've got enough of that pattern now to be able to put that in another shape. So what I'm going to do is group all that together. It doesn't matter that I've got some bits that it's not perfectly symmetrical. It doesn't matter about that. What we're going to do now is we need a shape to go around the outside edge, just to divide it. All right, so this isn't going to be cut. This is just to divide this shape. So I'm going to drag this out and make it bigger. Doesn't matter how big it is, as long as it's bigger. All right, all we want is to be able to divide it. So if I hadn't put a rectangle around that, I have nothing to punch that pattern through. So if you imagine that this is your rectangle is your white sheet of card, and your divide is this is your punch. And divide is going to put pressure on that pattern and punch it through that white page. You have to find what works in your brain that makes sense. So I'm going to drag across both of those. I'll tell you how I remember it. Digital, divide begins with DI and digital punch begins with DI. That's how my brain works. That's how I have to remember stuff. I have all these little quirky things going on in my head that make sense to me, but you might be thinking, wow, okay. Right, so we're going to grab this, and I am going to align it just because I like to make sure that everything's nice and neat and tidy. It's just the way I am. I can't help it. So now we're going to divide this. So we'll go to here and we'll divide this. That could be a front of a card right there. Just cut in a nice strip of ribbon across here with a bow, or maybe just a sentiment tab and a little flower. You've got yourself a card front there. That, honestly, once you start playing like this, it's never ending. So I've now got a card front. I've also got a stencil, because that would be perfect to cut in. So if we edit and group that, so I've now got my cut in and I've got my cut out. And at any point, you can go to project. And if you click on this one, it says save as another project. If you click on that, and I think as a beginner, do that quite often because you can go back step by step. I know you can undo, but if you save it just to make sure, okay? This is how I worked, because you are a little bit nervous. And I know I was on TV yesterday and a lovely gentleman emailed in and went, I really want to start, but I don't know what to do. I'm a bit scared. Hence, we're doing this class today. And also, if you are watching us on YouTube, anywhere around the world, if there's anything that you want me to show you, please email us. And I'm going to give you my email address. I might seriously regret this, but I need to know what you want to learn, because these classes are bespoke for you. This isn't about me going, look how clever I am. This is about me going, right, what do you want to learn? Let me teach you what you want to learn. So my email address is mel@highlightcrafts.com. Email me and let me know what you'd like to see. Would you want to see vinyl? Do you want to see fabric? Do you want to see dough flex? Do you want to see mylar? What do you want to see? Because then we can make it personal for you, which is super cool. Right, so I've got my card front. So I'm going to bring in a heart. Shall I bring in a heart? No, let's do a heart because it replicates the hearts that are already in there. So I'm going to see, I like my heart there, and I quite like it centrally vertically, so I can do that with my alignment function in a minute. But I also want to just drag this out. I want to make it more like a folk art heart. So I'm going to drag that down to about there, I think. All right, so it can be as big or as small as you want it to be. So the next thing we have to do now is send this heart to the back. So first of all, I'm going to select both and I'm going to go to edit, and I'm just going to make sure that it's aligned centrally, vertically. And let's actually align it centrally. No, I'm going to leave it as it is, because if I align it centrally, horizontally, it's going to move it further up. And this part of the heart here will end up there and you won't have any pattern in it. So look at your pattern and what it looks like, and then look at your heart, and I might just nudge that heart over a little bit. So I'm looking down here now at these two parts of the circle and trying to get it so it's more or less even at the bottom. Right, okay. So this is important, this next bit. You click on the heart, you go to edit, and you send it to the back in order, not backwards, to the back. And as I said before, nothing changes. But then you grab both of these, you go up to edit, and you go to remove overlap. And let's see what happens with remove overlap. We're going to do this with different things. So when I now move this, it's put that pattern in that heart. Isn't that clever? Let me show you that again. So I'm going to undo it. I'm going to click on the heart. When you click on it in the middle, the rectangle lights up or selects, you know that the rectangle is on the top. So I'm going to send the heart to the back. So edit, order, and send to the back. Then I'm going to drag a box over these two. I'm going to go to edit, and I'm going to remove overlap. And it looks like nothing's happened, but actually when you look inside some of these shapes like that, you can see the line of the heart. So you're going to pick this up, you're going to move that out of the way, and then that heart would then cut into your card front. If you want that heart to cut out, you do a different thing. So let's undo it. We don't do anything different, you just do an extra step. So, heart. I'm going to send the rectangle to the back, edit, send to the back. I'm going to select the heart and I'm going to duplicate it. So this is creating the outside cutting edge now. We're going to go to edit and we're going to duplicate it. I'm now going to create an offset line around the outside of this heart. Okay, so we're going to go back up to edit, and like we did at the beginning, go into your create offset line, and we're back in inches now. So let me cancel that. Let me go back into view and let me go back into millimeters. I know that 0.04 inches is 1 millimeter, but if you're somebody that doesn't work in inches or millimeters or switch between the two, you work from whichever increment of measurement you prefer. It's up to you, however you prefer. Right, so I'm going to create a 4 millimeter outward offset line this time. So 4 millimeter outward, and I'm going to delete the original, all right, because I don't need the original. And then when I press OK, it will just leave me with the heart that's got the 4 millimeter outward offset. And you can tell it's offset because the bottom of the heart is no longer pointed. It's curved itself, it's rounded itself. The difference, if you were just making the heart bigger, the point would stay pointed. But because you're creating an offset line, what an offset line does is it creates the 4 millimeter distance even all the way around the heart. If you were just making the heart bigger, in fact, let me do it and then I can show you, because it's interesting for you to see this as well, because what I want you to understand as well is why I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm not just doing it because I can, doing it because there's a reason for it. So let's say we made the heart here, which is 138.6. Let's say we move that up by 8 mil. So 146. It makes the heart bigger, but it keeps the points. But look what happens when I overlay. In fact, let me do this. Let me move this over for you, then you can see better. Look what happens. I'm going to move all this out of the way because this is important that you know this bit as well. So you've got your bigger heart and you've got your smaller heart. Now, just by resizing it, look at the difference that this makes. So this is when nesting dies. This is why it's difficult to nest dies and get them perfectly even. Because what it's done is it's made it 4 millimeters bigger all the way around, right? Which is where the 8 mil comes in. But look at the distance between the point there and the point on the offset. Look at the distance between the original and the offset there. And then the difference between the original and the offset there. It doesn't create a perfect matte layer. Whereas an offset line, where am I? Not that one. Get rid of that one. Don't need that one now. If I have this inside here, so if I align these two, and it's a little bit different with the heart, which is why I wanted to show you this. But look, it gives me a perfect 4 millimeter gap all the way around the outside edge, from the point, from the base, from the curve. That's the difference between making a shape bigger and creating an offset. And that is crucial, I think, because if you're going to punch your pattern into the smaller heart and you want to cut it out, you want it to be even. Otherwise, it looks like you've done something wrong. So let's go back to this now. So we're going to keep that to one side. And I have thousands of projects saved just from sitting and playing. Sometimes at night, because I'm a devil at night. This is like Confessions of a Crafter now. At night, I'll finish work, and I try and finish work by about 7 o'clock in the evening, if possible. And then I'll watch a bit of television. But while I'm watching television, I tend to eat chocolate a lot. So what I started doing is having my laptop on my knee, and while I'm watching something that's going on that I don't need to concentrate on, I sit and play. I'll show you some of my projects after, because there's loads of them. Right, so I've got my heart. First thing, remember, we edit and we send it to the back. Then we grab both, we go to edit and we remove overlap. And then we move our original pattern, which we've already saved, and we've now got our heart. So now what I want to do is put this inside of there so it can cut out. So that will cut into your card. By putting this over, it will then cut out. So we're going to drag over here. We're going to go to Edit, and we're going to align centrally vertically and centrally horizontally. And then we can group that, and that will then create your cutout. Now, offset lines. We might as well deal with offset lines while we're here. So I've grouped that. So I'm going to go to Edit and ungroup it. So my outside line is separate. Right. If you're working on a CM machine, this is only for CM. You can do this if you want to with your SDX, but there is a function on SDX that makes this a little bit quicker, but you can still do it with the CM. So this is your inside detail, and this is your outside detail. So if I want to create another layer to go on top of here, I want the outside to be bigger and I want the detail to be smaller. All right, so let's do that. Let's do it this way first, and then I'll show you the other way. So I'm going to duplicate the heart first of all, and I'm also going to duplicate the pattern. I'm going to go to Edit and duplicate the pattern, because you're not wasting anything by doing that. So that's going to be your original one. So we might as well deal with that now. So let's grab both of those, go to Edit and align centrally vertically, Edit and align centrally horizontally, Edit and group. Right, so I need to make this inside smaller, right, so that you see it behind here. Right, so let me show you this. So if we go to Edit and we create a 1mm inward offset line and delete the original, because the original I've just duplicated, so I don't need it, and press OK. Now it's telling me it can't do it because there's a path somewhere that either might be too small. All right, so let's try it a different way. Let's go and do an edit, and let's do an outward offset line. It doesn't always work the same. It depends on the shape and it depends on the design. So some shapes work and some shapes don't. So it says it can't do this with an intersecting path. So somewhere there is a piece that it's not quite happy with. So you can try and find the piece if you want to, or you can just accept that for right now, this is how it can't do it. And it might be because some of these pieces are too small, or when I add a 1mm outline on, it's going to overlap the original. So some you can and some you can't, and it will depend on the design. And it's nothing that you're doing wrong or anything that's wrong with Canvas Workspace. It's just the way it's been set up. Okay, so I'm going to try one more thing for SDX users and just see. Let me just see if it will work with the pattern before we put it in the heart, because then I can try and find out if there's an issue somewhere, because I'm not good at when it says no to me. I'm not good at that bit. Right, I'm going to get rid of that as well. I can't ungroup this, so I'm going to download it and then send it back. So we're going to download. There's so much for me to teach you, and I know this is a lot of information, but just do it. Just have a play, because you've nothing to lose. You've nothing to lose, and you'll learn so much. And 8.5 years on, I discovered something last week just by playing around on Canvas, and I was like, wow, that opens up a whole new world of possibilities. And I'll teach you that at some point as well. Right, so let's go back to home here. We've downloaded it, so let's retrieve it from the cloud. Thinking about it, there it is, and then let's save it straight back into the cloud. Let's see what we get. It says the save was successful, so we're going to close that. We're going to delete that because we don't need it anymore. Then we're going to go to My Projects. Now, because Canvas is already open, you'll need to refresh, because if Canvas is already open when you save something, you always have to refresh for it to put it in the queue, if you like. Right, let's see if this works. So let's go to Edit. And then sometimes it does this to you. Okay, so you just have to give it a minute. What I tend to do is go in and I'll add something. And I don't know why it does it. And I don't think Brother would know why it does it either, because I think it's just one of those things that sometimes happens. Let's go to edit, and still not allowing me to do it. Right, I'm going to download it again. And it is one of those things, and this is another reason why. It might let me do it, it might not, I don't know. But this is another reason why I wanted to show you Canvas, because when I was doing a class once, and there was something when we were trying to subtract part of something, and it kept leaving a line, a random line. And sometimes it did it and sometimes it didn't, even though we were doing the same thing. And the ladies on the class said, I'm really glad it's done that, because now I know it's not me. Because you instantly blame yourself, don't you? And it's not you. Sometimes it's technology. So let's go to retrieve and the cloud, and let's see, try one more time. And it might not allow me to do it, but we can always try, can't we? So let's save back into the cloud. Excellent. Right, so let's now go back here and see if it will allow me to do it. Now remember, even though I've got the project there, I need to refresh it. And it will always put the new one in the top left corner, just like you read a book, left to right. That's how it will put it in order. Right, let's see now. I'm going to give it a few seconds just to think about it. It's not going to let me do that, is it? Right, so the way that you can do it on a SDX then is different now. So if I go to, let me just try one more time, because sometimes you've just got to wait a little while for it. And then suddenly it decides to do it. No, it's not having it, is it? Little monkey. Of all the designs I could have done, it's this one, isn't it, that it's not going to like. Right, I'm going to divide this so that I can show SDX users how you can then create your offsets. Right, let's see. Now, if I can do it this way. Let me just try this. Let me grab that and see if it will allow me to do an offset of this bit for you so that I can see if that will work. I spend hours doing stuff like this at home because I'm not good at people saying no or things saying no. Let's see if I can get an offset line of this. Let's see if I can get a 1mm outward, delete the original and press OK. Okay, so it's allowed me to do that bit. Now, what it's done is made some of these a little bit too big, because now trying to get that off your mat wouldn't work. So it doesn't like that pattern, and it's just because of the distance of the pattern. That's all it is. Some patterns it will work perfectly for you and some it won't. I'm just going to undo that. I'm going to do an inward offset this time. Right, it's having a little bit of a moment, I think. Sometimes it takes a little while and you get this message, the page is not responding. It's because I've asked it to do too much in one go. It's a bit like me. If you give me a million things to do at once, I'm like, right, what do you want me to do first? And then I go and pause, waiting for a response. So you just have to wait for the page to come back to life, if you like. There, it's still asking me. Yes, I'll wait, thank you. This is another reason why I'd like you to save your projects quite regularly as you go along, as you're making them, because that makes a difference. Right, let's try that a different way now. So let's do, now it might be that some of the pieces are too small to create an inward offset line. That might be a thing, but we'll soon find out. So if we go to edit and we create a 1mm inward offset line this time and delete the original. Okay, so it's left me with that. So what I could then do, and the reason it's just left me with the hearts is because these pieces are too small and it can't create a 1mm inward all the way around them. So there's all these little things that you start to learn about, which is fabulous. But if I now line this over the top of here, what will happen is that heart panel that you've just, in fact, let's align it. I'm just going to see if it'll allow me to ungroup that yet, just because I'm like that. No, it's still not having it. We live in hope, don't we, sometimes? So I'm going to edit and I'm going to align it centrally vertically. and edit and align it centrally, horizontally. And then I'm just going to nudge it up a little bit, because when you're working with these funny shaped hearts, sometimes you just have to nudge it up. So now you can see you've got a perfect layer that will go just behind the hearts. So if you did that in a different colour, you could actually then see what it's going to look like. So it might be that the top layer is white and you have the red hearts underneath, or it might be that the smaller layer is pink and then you have a white card in the background. But it enables you to create other things, which is super cool. So I'm just going to see if I can send this back to my ScanNCut. This next bit now is for SDX users. I'm just going to see if it'll allow me to divide it first. So edit and divide, just in case it's already divided. So if you try and divide something that's already divided, it just won't do anything. All right, so don't worry about that. Right, so for SDX users only, I'm going to download this now. And then I'm going to show you what you can do in here. And sometimes it works perfectly and sometimes it doesn't. I've got a made from the memory USB coming out on the 23rd of February. And I've made sails for a windmill and it works perfectly. And some patterns, it just won't. And there will be a reason. It will be that a point where a shape joins is too tight and it can't get in there to create an offset. There's all sorts of different reasons. But if it says no, it usually says no for a reason, to be fair. So I'm going to retrieve it from the cloud. And then I'm going to show you what happens with an SDX. So in edit on an SDX, an object edit, you have the offset function there. Now what's really good about the offset function on an SDX is that it allows you, that its minimum is 1 millimeter. But from 1 millimeter, you can go 1 1/4, 1 1/2, 1 3/4, and then 2. And those increments in between going up and down, which is great because it means you can be more accurate. But the minimum is 1 millimeter. So when I click on this, its default is 1 1/2. Let me, see, I need to go into millimeters, don't I? So let me go into my resize and let me change that in the spanner to millimeters. Right, so now when I go into here, it will come up at 1.5 millimeters. So 1.5 millimeter outward offset line. And what that will do is it makes, I'm going to show you because this is clever, this only happens when you've divided it. If you do it and you don't divide it, it won't do it. All right, so this is important. So now you can see, look, it's given me that heart layer automatically. And it's allowed me to do that because as it creates, if you do an outward offset line, it makes the outside shape bigger, but it makes the inside shape smaller. If you do an inward offset line, it makes the outside shape smaller and the inside shapes bigger. And that's how sometimes I can get 3 layers going. So I can design something and I can have a layer that sits behind the original, and another layer that sits on top. And sometimes you can do that with certain patterns, but it's just about playing. I can't look at a pattern and say, yes, it will work, but Canvas can. So you just ask the question, and if it goes, sorry, I can't do that, then you know it doesn't work, because that's working digitally. It's plotting. It's like a big plotter, basically, and it's going around the shape and seeing if it can fit without the other shapes overlapping it. So there's loads and loads of different things that you can do. So literally 3 shapes. You know, you've got loads and loads and loads of shapes pre-installed in your machine's memory. Some will work better than others. Just have a play around. And that's the joy. And I love doing this bit. And I remember during lockdown, actually, I was living down in Peterborough because the studios were there. And we had a house and we had our little work bubble. And one of the members of our bubble came in one night after doing a show, and I was just sitting on the settee. He said, and all I could hear when I walked in was you going, oh, look at that. Oh, that's really cool. And I was just designing stencils. So when you sit down in the morning at your craft desk with your ScanNCut and you're like, right, what do I want to do? I want to make a card. What do I want it to look like? Well, I want a nice decorative panel, maybe cut into my card. I want a nice sentiment plaque, and I might want a bow or I might want some flowers on it. You can then create that cut-in detail It's so cool. And that's what I've always said about ScanNCut. You can go into your room and you can create the project that you've got in your head, rather than the project that you have to make because you've got a die that's that big, or that oval doesn't quite fit right with that mat and layer. You can make it all happen with a ScanNCut. And then Canvas takes you a little bit further, and then a bit further, and then a bit further, and a bit more. And it's super exciting. And if I just do this, I'm going to show you some of the projects that I've done, just so that you can have a look at some of mine. So to get back to the homepage for this, I'm just going to go click on the Canvas Workspace logo at the top and click on Leave. And it comes back to Canvas Project. But at the top, it also has this. Now, if you do a project and you want to delete it from the cloud, you will do it here, okay? You can't, just by bringing it on the mat and deleting it doesn't make any difference. So when you do this, you've got an option to delete it with a cross at the top. This button is an edit button. So this will put it back on a workable mat for you in Canvas Workspace. And this button will download it for you. So you've got choices all the way. So this was one that I did, I think I did this one while I was at the hospital. So you can see you've got all these different pieces with the hearts. So I think this was an octagon, I want to say an octagon, a square and a heart, I think. So there's that one. Let's get rid of that. Let's go back into here. Then these were the ones that I was doing while I was in hospital. I found them because they're quite cool actually. So let's have a look. I wanted to do like a numbers stencil, and these are some made from the memory that you'll learn. So if you're somebody watching this video and you think, what is she talking about, made from the memory? Every so often I go into my craft room with flat pieces of paper and I come out with something that's 3-dimensional. And it's made just from the shapes inside the machine's memory. Okay, so no files whatsoever. And then what we do is we put all the instructions and photograph it step by steps on a USB, and you create the files. And as soon as you start to get to that level, and all you need to know to be able to do that is what the buttons do. That's all you need to do. If I say send it into Canvas and divide it, as long as you know how to send it into Canvas and press divide, you can make that project. So it's not difficult, but these, things like this. So I sat there and I was like, right, I quite fancy like a bit of a jangly picture. So let's do something like this. So again, you've got a cutout detail, you remove the outside edge, you've got a cut-in detail, just doing it with 2 rows, doing it with several rows, all this kind of thing. You know, you can just play around with and literally play, and you will lose hours of your life, but you're making some amazing things. I watched a film the other night and I looked at Stephanie afterwards and I was like, well, that's 2 hours of a life we're never going to get back, because it was rubbish. I'd rather have spent 2 hours watching this or playing with this. Right, so then we've got things like, believe it or not, this sunburst here is made with straight lines. It amazes me, and again, it's understanding. Now look how I've put different colours in here. So you've got the pale pink, you've got the mid pink, and you've got the dark pink, and all that is different, like straight lines, and you just rotate them all the way around, and then you put a square of them. We'll do this on one of the classes. But how cool is that? You've created your own sunburst. You know, all these things, and it's fun. I'm really bad for this. I know I'm really bad for this, but sometimes when I'm on TV, there'll be somebody selling something like a stamp positioner or a wreath maker or something like that that you use with a stamping platform. And they're selling the piece that goes inside so you can line up to this particular shape. And I'm like, make that my ScanNCut. I do it all the time. But you've got 4 layers here of this sunburst. Now that, if I just select all those again and align them, that on the front of a card, just with the sentiment in the middle for a man's card, will look absolutely fabulous. You could even put a circle inside there and divide a circle so you'd have an aperture in the middle of it. It's all sorts of different things like this that are just brilliant. And there's no way of doing it. Well, there is a way of doing it, but divide is crucial. Okay, so divide is definitely definitely something that you want to get to grips with. Let me just show you a few more of the things that I've done. So let me find the numbers one that I did. So I wanted to create some like arty stencils, you know, just things that you can have going on in the background for men's cards particularly. So I've taken one of the fonts and just rotated the letters or flipped the letters or whatever. I've then taken another font, and this was something really interesting, and we're going to do a whole class on this called splitting a shape, where you can split a letter, so then any of the fonts can become a stencil. Because by splitting the O, instead of it cutting the whole thing out, it cuts that side and it cuts that side. So that's another class that we're going to do. Let me just see if I can find you another couple, and then we'll call it a day for now, because I've given you a lot of information today, and I know I have, and I know it's a lot to take in, but I now want you to go away and practice it. And then what I'd really like to do is do something on social media where we share our projects, so you can see, you know, how somebody's made it and what they've done. Let me have a look at, there was another one, this one here. So this is one of the projects that is on the Made from the Memory. It's one of the cards. So what I've done here is created a whole circle of circles and then made them concentric and then split that full circle in two. It's super cool. And I don't think I've come across anything yet. And I say yet because there'll always be somebody out there waiting for me to say something, and they go, well, actually, you can't do this. There's nothing yet that I've discovered that I haven't been able to make work. So if you've got a challenge for me, please feel free to send it, because I love challenges. It's my favourite thing. But yeah, have a play around in Canvas. And I know, I mean, I was the first one. You know what I'm like? I love my ScanNCut. I don't like technology. I'm not good with computers at all. But one Saturday afternoon, I was like, oh, do you know what? It's your job, Melanie. Get online, have a play with Canvas, see what you come up with. And the first thing I did, and I think we've talked about this before actually, but I'm going to show you again, is basic shape. So if I bring on two circles, so I've got one there, I then just duplicate it, so I've got two. So I'm going to select both, so go to Edit and select all, or you can drag a box around them, it doesn't matter. And then go to Edit and see what these do. So process overlap, weld. Well, we know what weld does. It welds the two together, it digitally glues them. The next one is divide. What happens then? What happens to these circles? That's what happens. It gives you a shape. Now, straight away, you put a shape over a shape, you get a different shape. Start thinking about that, how cool that's going to be, right? This is the bit that got me really excited. Then we undo this, and then we go to Edit and we select all. And this time, we're going to remove the overlap. So that gives you something different. And then we're going to go back and do the same thing again. So we'll select all, and this time we'll subtract. And that's what that does. So just by bringing on two shapes and seeing what those buttons do, kind of give you a guideline, a starting point as to what you can achieve, and just start to play. For example, I know I said I was going to stop, but just one more thing, because I get all these ideas and I want to share them all with you. If you've got an advent calendar, you know the advent calendars where they've got the little drawers and they've got the notch cut out of the middle. If I make that smaller and I align that there, so I'm going to position it so that it is aligned centrally vertically, so I know the circle's in the middle at the top. I can kind of gauge by eye that's pretty accurate. If I do this, so if I weld it, it's going to add the circle to the square. But let's do it all, see what we do. Okay, so that gives you more like a tab. So that might be that you're making a memory album. You're going to put a photograph on here and you want a tab there. You might want to put a little circle in and thread a ribbon through. You can do that. And then that pulls out of your album. So that's one option. Then the next one, let's see what this gives us. And sometimes they give us the same thing. This one splits that, and then it also splits that. So you draw front. So your draw front for your advent calendar is 100mm square, and your notch, you measure this width here. So let's say that's 50mm. So you'd have a 50mm circle and a 100mm square. You do exactly what I've just done, and it would be a perfect notch. Then, if that's the size of the draw front, if you go to Edit and create an inward offset line, this gives you the perfect file for your patterned paper to go on the front. And you can keep going like that. And you can do your mats and layers on your numbers. So please have a play with Canvas. Don't be scared. So if you haven't downloaded it yet, well, you don't download it. It's a web app. If you haven't got into Canvas yet, search Brother Canvas Workspace web app version and load that on your laptop and play around with it. If you're already au fait with the graphics program, then by all means download the PC version. That's just my personal opinion, because it's got file and edit and all these drop-down boxes, and I don't know where everything is. And I'll spend more time trying to find it and getting frustrated than just doing it on here. So have a play around, find the version that suits you, have a play around. Don't forget anything that you want us to teach, please let me know so we can start to make a list. Because there's no point me coming on here week after week doing these classes if it's not what you want to learn. So let me know, all right, which is fabulous. Right, I'm going to close there. I'm going to say thank you ever so much again for joining me. It's so lovely to be back with you. And a massive thank you for all the comments of concern that you've had. I am okay. I'm still doing more tests, but I'm back at work and I feel more or less back to normal. So we're all good. And it's just been lovely to hear from you from all over the world, which is just amazing. So thank you very much. And I will see you on the next class. Take care. Lots of love. Bye-bye. If you want to see more from Highlight Crafts, make sure you click the like button. Subscribe by clicking the subscribe button below and click the bell icon to receive notifications of all our future content. You can also click here to see our latest video, or click here to see more videos like this one.